Welcome to our live position here on the Grand Parade in Cape Town as we continue to track what is the big developing story, certainly in the Western Cape. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to bring in our next guest. Reagen Allen is the Western Cape's Police Oversight and Community Safety MEC. MEC, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. At this hour, 6:47, what's the latest update you can give us?
We can confirm that most roads are open, the N1, the N2, the N7. We can also confirm that Golden Arrow is operating at a reduced capacity. My city is solidly operating across the city of Cape Town as well. But also, Michelle, we are monitoring a number of hotspot areas. In Kraaifontein today, also in Umfuleni. But I've just received information with regards to outside of the city of Cape Town as well. We have a deployment of over 1,500 law enforcement officers, including the South African Police Service, because we are wanting to create stability. Yesterday we saw 68 arrests. We also saw 142 criminal cases being registered because we are wanting to create a province, a country where people are actually abiding by the law.
I'm glad you brought in the issue of a province-wide approach from you as MEC, because it's not just focused in the city of Cape Town, right? There are other areas in the province heavily impacted by the strike as well.
Most definitely, and since my appointment, I've made it very clear that we are wanting to consistently see that murder is being reduced. It was the only province in the last quarter that saw a double-digit decrease in the murder rate. And yesterday, in visiting the scene in Nyanga, seeing the body, and then seeing the family and friends of loved ones standing around, and at that particular time, the forensics came and removed the body from the scene. And it's difficult to see. It's difficult to see. We are wanting to create a situation where our economy can grow in the Western Cape, where we get people to and from work, but where we have the ability to have safe environments, and that is ultimately across the entire province.
You're obviously talking about that video that was on social media yesterday of a vehicle being attacked. It was along the N2 around Borchard's Quarry, right? And it resulted in a motorist being shot dead, several other people being injured as well. It was indicative of the kind of violence that we've seen in connection with this taxi strike.
Michelle, since the strike was announced, we saw that violence around. We even saw last week, Friday, when one of our LEAP officers came under attack. He was murdered. I visited his family as well. 13 bullets with R5 ammunition was found inside of the LEAP officer's vehicle. It's not what we want, Michelle. We are wanting to see that our communities are safer, and I've already had engagements with the South African Police Service, and the investigations must leave no stone unturned. We are taking nothing off the table, considering that certain associations are claiming that they are not responsible. We are wanting the investigations to be conducted so that those culprits can be held accountable.
So MEC, let me ask you this, because I spent a great deal of time yesterday moving around, certainly the city of Cape Town, from various areas, from Nyanga to other areas on the Cape Flat, and then making my way here to the V&A waterfront. And there was a marked difference in how various parts of the city experienced this taxi strike. If the criticism to you this morning is that predominantly white areas were shielded from the effects of the strike, what would you say?
I would say I am fully aware of the deployment figures and where those deployment figures are operating. I can confirm, Michelle, if we consider where our LEAP officers operate, they are predominantly in our priority areas, or what we call our hotspot areas, and that is Khayelitsha, Umfuleni, Harare, Mitchell's Plain. We have also seen when traffic services are deployed, it was at our key points. It's in partnership with the South African Police Service. I was actually at 11 o'clock yesterday after we have cleared the airport arterial. I was at the airport meeting with the South African Police Service and the entire top management of the South African Police Service across the province. And in that particular engagement, we again saw where those figures, where those members were deployed. And it was in our key hotspot areas, Michelle. And I can confirm that in partnership with the South African Police Service, even the military police, law enforcement, traffic. So it is joint integrated approaches that we are taking.
So then would you say that deployment didn't work as well as was intended? Because certainly, walking around the V&A waterfront yesterday, the only way you could see the impact of the strike was that shops shut their doors early. Other than that, tourists were moving around, and it did seem to be business as usual.
We are always open to moving quicker and smarter, and when we get an early warning alert, we are wanting to quickly make sure that there is resources available in that regard, but also those communities that were impacted. It was also as a result of when there's stone throwing at certain intersections, for example, and that happens predominantly, sadly, Michelle, in areas that is impoverished. If we look at Nanga and Guguletu, I remain open to having those conversations with the South African Police Service, with law enforcement, because we are wanting to see that we can be proactive. And where we deploy is where the need is, when certain matters happen, so we monitor where murders happen, where sporadic incidences occur, so that we can actually be more proactive. It is smart policing, evidence-based policing, that we have been able to foster now with the South African Police Service and with law enforcement here in the city of Cape Town, where we know exactly when murders are happening, what time it is happening, when the most deployed officers should be in that particular area in order to help and assist the crime rate. We are reaping the successes. We are still not happy with a 14.1% reduction in the murder rate. It was the highest, the only province with a double-digit decrease. We are still not happy with that because we are wanting to see further reductions in murder, in crime categories, etc.
Well, let's stay with issues around the taxi strike, MEC. It's now in almost a full week of the taxi stay away. The stay away has included scholar transport as well. It's had a massive impact on learners getting to school. Just yesterday, almost 500,000 learners couldn't get to class. Almost 20,000 teachers couldn't get to class. What has been, in your opinion, the big issue with trying to get Santaco and all the other associations and interested parties and government officials around a table and to progress those talks to a positive solution?
Thank you for bringing that particular matter in as well. You are quite correct that we have seen in education, but also in health, even social development. And whenever services are not being rendered in the community, it is the community that suffers. I was part of a discussion yesterday, Michelle, which included the National Minister of Transport, including city officials and the Premier. I can confirm that as of 6 hours ago, 12:30 last night, discussion stopped. The strike is currently still ongoing, but we were hoping that there would be a resolution. But to answer your question in the most simplest way, is the enforcement of the law. The enforcement of the law is making Santaco not wanting to operate. We are wanting to see that enforcement happens so that we don't need to be in an area like Mitchell's Plain, where we saw 7 kids being killed in an accident. We don't want to be in an area where we report on road fatalities. I think any person listening to me would have sadly been exposed to taxi operators and to motorists that are disobeying the laws. We are wanting to ultimately ensure that enforcement happens, but not in a heavy-handedness.
Is enforcement different for taxis as opposed to ordinary motorists? That's certainly what the taxi associations are saying, right? That there's a heavy-handed approach for traffic violations when we talk about taxis versus just an ordinary motorist. Instead of getting a traffic fine, they're having their vehicles impounded. Is that true?
It's a two-part, if I can answer it in a two-part way. On the one hand is that whenever you sign your compliance to receive your permit, those permits that are issued to taxi operators come with certain conditions. And for example, you should have a PDP. You should have a valid driver's license. You shouldn't drive under the influence of alcohol or reckless or negligent. Most people would have witnessed that from taxi drivers. And we are never wanting any situation where a person, even on a sidewalk, has been bumped in the past before. So it's not a different approach, it's in terms of the law. So as a motorist, I would have to obey the law. I would have to stick to the rules of the road so that I don't create or add to anarchy on our roads. But it is a matter that we are discussing, and yesterday, especially from the Premier, it was very clear that we are needing to look at the data set in terms of serious offences and minor offences. That particular data is being collected now so that we can have those engagements with Santaco in terms of the narrative that Santaco is spewing about a different approach to operators.
Yeah, so the strike meant to continue, at least according to Santaco, until tomorrow. You obviously want the city and the province to get back to business as usual. How do we ensure that happens? Your final parting shot, MEC.
We will continue with our deployments today because we are wanting to see stability, we are wanting to see peace. Michelle, it would be remiss of me not to mention the following, is that the resources and the deployment could have been utilized in our priority in our gang-ridden areas. Now we are needing to redeploy into other areas to curb taxi violence and to curb stone throwing, etc. But my understanding would be that I sincerely trust that we would get to a point where we can get our residents to and from work, that we can get our schools open, that we can get our people to use primary healthcare facilities and social workers to go into communities. So that is my hope.
Reagen Allen, let me thank you for your time this morning. The Western Cape's Police Oversight and Community Safety MEC talking to me about a whole wide range of issues insofar as the taxi strike continues. We are now very firmly going to week 2. It's until tomorrow that Santaka has promised this stay away will continue.